Hello everyone, Rabbi Abe, welcome. Welcome back, because this teaching is going to change your life. If you practice it, it can help you remove any problem from your life. Begin a transformation of that process. So don't take this video lightly. This is not one of the teachings to listen with one ear. Wait till you get comfortable before you teach it. Look at it all the way through, because every aspect of this teaching is important, and also to put it into practice. And I will tell you how to do that. Of course, we have a download, free download on rabbieabe.com to help us put this into practice and to activate it. But let's get into it. This teaching comes from the Torah, the end of the book of Exodus, chapter 47, actually the end of chapter 47. Just to get us into the framework, this is Jacob's farewell. Jacob is going to pass away in this portion, and Joseph is currently the prince of Egypt, in charge of all the food and all the money. And Joseph has already revealed himself to his brothers. Remember, if you know your Bible stories, Joseph's brothers had sold him into slavery and then gave them a really hard time when they finally made it to Egypt to purchase food. And finally, Joseph revealed himself. There was a rejoicing, and they celebrated. But eventually, Jacob came, and he came for the last 17 years of his life. And strangely enough, Egypt, which was supposedly the place of great negativity, for 17 years, Jacob enjoyed apparently the best days of his life in Egypt. Apparently, maybe it wasn't that bad of a place after all, but we're not going into that idea. What we are focusing on is a teaching from one of the great Kabbalists who is named Ccept, Rabbi Yehuda Aryeh of Gur. He was called the Ccept, which translates into true words or words of truth, which was one of his major works, Kabbalistic works and commentaries on the Bible. He was a great Kabbalist, lived not that long ago, probably about 200 to 300 years ago. And he explains a number of ideas here. But before that, there is a reference to the Book of Kings. So we'll get into what the Kabbalists wrote, but there is a reference to the Book of Kings, because there's something unusual about this Torah portion that occurs, and I won't go into the details, but generally in the actual scroll of the Torah, there is a number of spaces between the portions. So one portion ends, another portion begins. There's 52 some odd portions, actually 54 or so, because there's a leap year that occurs on occasion. And when there's no leap year, double portions are read. Okay, if that sounds confusing, that's okay, doesn't matter. But there's generally a space between the sections. But there's one section that has no space, and it seems to be just part of the previous portion. It goes right into the next portion, and that is the portion which is called Vayechi. Vayechi. He lived. That's literally what it means. He lived. And that is referring to Jacob, that he lived, as we said, 17 years in the land of Egypt. And he enjoyed the last 17 years of his life, but he was doing his farewells to his sons and to, of course, his grandchildren, Joseph's sons as well, Ephraim and Manasseh, or Menashe, Ephraim and Menashe. And there is something that comes from Kings, because the Kabbalists asked the question, why is there no space? It's the only portion in the entire year that the last week portion and the week following portion, they're stuck together. It's called a closed portion. Closed. It's closed. The Kabbalah says this is a hint to when God closed his heart and closed his eyes. Closed his eyes and closed his heart. Well, why would God do that? And this portion is the beginning of what is called the exile. Exile. Exile, of course, referencing in the Bible story, from the Bible perspective, this is referencing the exile into Egypt. And then we go into the book of Exodus, which is all the story of the slavery and everything that happened over there, and Moses, and eventually, the eventual Exodus out of Egypt, but not before a lot of pain and suffering and several hundred years of this slavery. So, and it is because God closed his heart and his eyes that the exile occurred. That's on the surface. We have to go to the books to understand what is the meaning of this. Does God have eyes, first of all, and a physical heart that he closes? What do you think? Well, we go to the book of Kings. And in the book of Kings, there is a reference. It refers to when King Solomon built the temple. And in Kings, it says the following, I'll quote, Kings chapter 9, verse 3. And the Lord said to him, meaning Solomon, because Solomon really, really begged and pleaded that God would be in the temple, the presence of the Creator would be there all the time. And we understand through Kabbalistic teachings that the physical temple is 1% of what we call a temple. The Kabbalists explain, and the Zohar also makes it clear in other places, that the temple really refers to this, us. We are the temple. We are a temple, or the spiritual vessel, and our purpose is to receive and to be able to be connected at all times with the Creator's light. And when the Creator's light is present, there's no problems, there's no chaos, there's no confusion, there are no problems. But for whatever reason, we go into exile. There's something called exile, and exile is another code word. Exile is a code word for chaos, confusion, difficulties, challenges, exile. So the exile is really what? When we are disconnected from the Creator's light. Now that can be once a day, once a month, 10 times a day, once a year, whatever. Whenever we experience difficulty, challenges, problems, lack, this is called exile. Code name, exile, galut in Hebrew. That is an exile. And so it says in Kings, and the Lord said to him, referring to King Solomon, who was begging that the Creator would be at the temple at all times, I have heard your prayer and your supplication that you have made before me. I have consecrated this house which you have built to put my name there forever, to put my name there forever, and my eyes and my heart shall be there all the days. Now, what is this referring to? And this is a direct idea to what is known as divine providence. In Hebrew, this is called hashgacha pratit, divine providence. What is divine providence? I mean, I'm sure we've all experienced when we literally feel the presence of God with us. We feel the presence of the Creator. Whether things are, even if sometimes things are not necessarily going our way, but we feel kind of, the hand of God. You feel there's no coincidence happening today. This is just things that, sometimes things are just clicking. And again, it may not be exactly the way I want it, but even so, I feel the divine. I feel the divine. And sometimes we feel, not at all. We feel completely disconnected. We feel, I don't know, what's going to happen next? We don't know. We're waiting for the next shoe to drop. And things, again, even if they're going well, we don't necessarily feel connected, but we are, of course, distracted by things going well. But there's this idea of the divine providence and not so much. And the Kabbalists, compare this idea of a divine province as a parent to a very young child. And imagine yourself, if you're a parent, we would all understand this, parent or not. If you're a parent and you have an infant who doesn't know what he's doing yet, maybe just learned to crawl, now, you got to watch him because you don't know where he's going and what's going on. So you have your eye on him all the time. But of course, the child gets older, and, as he gets older, a little bit more, growing up a little bit, and he can walk around, and he knows a little bit more right from wrong, or he knows not to put his finger in the electrical outlet, God forbid. So you have, a little less observance going on. And of course, now when he's a young adult or an adult, of course, you're not watching it all. The ideal situation, according to the Kabbalists, because this is a parable, this is only a spiritual analogy, is divine providence being with us all the time, like a parent with an infant. Think about it. If we had our druthers, if we had our choice about the situation, and we could choose for the Creator's eye, of course not a physical eye, but the divine providence, the protection, the direction of the Creator to be with us at all times, would we not choose that? And I know for myself, I definitely would choose it, and I do choose it. I want that. I want that all the time. 24/7, 7 days a week, 365. I would like that. I would like that, personally. And so this idea of open heart, open eye, or closed heart and closed eye have a spiritual significance. Because again, in Kings, it's referring to God's eye being opened, God's heart being opened. But apparently, in that section of the Bible, there was a time when allegedly, and I'll say allegedly, God's eye got closed and God's heart became closed. And therefore, what was able to happen was the exile. Many years of chaos and pain and suffering, hundreds of years. Why did it happen? What led to the exile? What leads to our exile? We need to understand. And especially when the Kabbalists make this statement, which we really need to understand. So, first off, whatever problem we are experiencing, whatever problem we will experience, began long before we saw the problem. Again, whatever problem we're experiencing, if it's a money problem, if it's a health problem, if it's a relationship issue, it began before we saw the problem occurring on the physical plane. What causes it? And this is called exile. Okay? This is called exile. In order to understand that, our personal exile, we need to understand the Israelites' exile when they were exiled into Egypt. What happened over there? But first, I want to share with you what this Sfat Emet, this great Kabbalist, shared on this particular idea and on this section. And he says the following. He says, no negativity ever comes from God. No negativity ever comes from the Shamayim, the heavens. Never. No exception to the rule. No negativity ever comes from God. And the Sfat Emet refers to divine providence, meaning the eye of the Creator upon humanity and upon every individual. And the idea that there is a concept of hidden goodness. Hidden, concealed goodness. What is it about? He says that there is a concept, And this is a Kabbalistic concept of concealed light, the light which is concealed. And by the way, light always needs to be concealed before it can be revealed. He says, in the portion, Jacob's death, and the fears of the brothers, that Joseph may seek revenge, highlight the tension between the concealment and revelation. I will explain, because this will explain every form of chaos or problem that we experience. The Sfat Emet interprets this as a lesson in recognizing that God's goodness is present even in times of uncertainty or apparent darkness. He often quotes the principle from Kabbalah that God's light is concealed in negative experiences, in what appears to be negative experiences, and it is awaiting a human effort in order to reveal that light. What do you mean? There's something we need to do. So, what is it speaking about here? And we have to answer the question, what precipitated the Israelites to fall into this exile? I.e., God's closing his eye and his heart to the Israelites. Did that ever really happen? So it says in chapter 50, it's chapter 50 in Genesis, that the brothers, now you remember, the brothers sold Joseph into slavery, and then suddenly they find out that he's alive and well in Egypt. And they were afraid because of all the stuff they did to their brother. I think any reasonable person would be afraid, you know what, this guy's going to take revenge on us because all the stuff we did to him, right? It's only natural, right? It's only normal. Verse 16, chapter 50, they instructed the messengers to tell Joseph, before he died, your father gave us instructions. Okay? This is what you must tell Joseph. So the brothers are telling Joseph in Jacob's name, who passed on already, forgive the spiteful deed and the sin your brothers committed when they did evil to you. In other words, they said that their father said, listen, forgive your brothers for everything they did to you. Forgive your brothers. And forgive the spiteful deed that we, your servants of your father's God, have done. And as they spoke to him, Joseph wept. Joseph cried as he heard this. Now, this is the normal story, and then there's the secret behind the story. The normal story might be, well, why would Joseph be crying at such a point? Well, maybe he felt bad about everything that they did to him. But it's not so. Joseph answers in verse 19. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, Joseph said. You might have meant to do me harm. You thought about bad. But God meant it for good. God meant it for good. In other words, whatever you did to me, you had maybe a bad intention. But it came from the Creator to do good for me. Now let's think about this for a second. Joseph went through a lot of stuff. Again, if you know your Bible stories, Joseph went through a lot. He was thrown in jail. The wife of his master cried rape. They threw him in jail. His brother sold him into slavery. They threw him in the pit. He went through all kinds of stuff. But you know what? Even when Joseph was in jail, what does it say in the Bible? He was in control. He was like the warden. He was in control of the jail. Every situation that Joseph was in, he was the shalit. It's called the shalit. He was in the control of the situation. Why? Why? Joseph never experienced what is called exile, galut. He never experienced this because Joseph represents a higher level of consciousness, which we'll talk about in a moment, and this is what's necessary. This is what's necessary. having the proper level of consciousness, using the correct meditation in order to have that level of consciousness where you are under divine providence all the time and never experience any form of exile. Remove the problems. He cried. When he heard the brothers saying this, he cried. Why did he cry? Because in that moment, Joseph saw the exile. How did he see the exile? Because at that moment, the brothers had a negative consciousness and believed that their brother would take revenge upon them. That was the seed level of the exile. The fact that they had doubt and uncertainty about the situation and lost connection with the eyes and the heart of the Creator in that moment. Again, Creator meant it for good. They meant it for bad. What does that even mean? In other words, first off, the first idea is number one. We need to understand that every situation is light. Everything comes from the light and everything is light, albeit it may be concealed and very well may be concealed in a state of concealment. But in the moment we react to it in a negative way and we think it's bad, we think it's a difficulty, we think, oh, this is a bad situation, this is a challenge. Well, it may be a challenge, but doesn't mean bad. We cause exile. In that moment, we plant the seed for difficulty, chaos, confusion, uncertainty to follow. When we don't handle a situation with the certainty that this is the light, in spite of what I'm looking at, in spite of the illusion, in spite of the concealment that I see at the moment, and we may have gotten ourselves raveled up in so much negativity that we can't even see straight. Yeah. But the beginning of getting out of that chaos, the beginning is all in our consciousness, how we begin to see things, how we begin to understand things. That it's not for the sake of bad, but it's for the sake of the good. Like it says, like Joseph said, you meant it for bad, but God meant it for good. So the bad situation that you put me in actually all turned out good. What enabled Joseph to see that? What gave Joseph that very special power? And it's such an important idea. The more our thoughts are only about ourselves, about our egos, about our selfish desires, the less we will be able to see. We'll be in the fog. And we won't be able to see the clarity that this is from the Creator, this is the light. And it becomes a vicious cycle. Because we get into ourself, and then because we're in ourself, we get more into ourself. And we get more into our own desires. And we're trying to get happy. Or we're trying to do this, or we're trying to do that, or we're trying to save, whatever. And we dig the hole deeper and deeper for us. They threw Joseph in a hole. But somehow he was able to get out of the hole. He was able to get out of the pit. Whatever situation he was in control of the situation, not the situation was in control over him. And that is the biggest takeaway. How do we know where we are in our headspace, in our consciousness? Who's in control? Am my fears? Am my doubts? Are my worries in control of me? Or am I in control of them? Is the light within me in control? Is the certainty, is the faith in the Creator that everything is for the good? It really is. When we say, oh, well, it's all good, do we really mean it? If we really meant it, it might actually help us to say, it's all good. Yes, but we have to believe in it wholeheartedly. Because it truly is. Why did Joseph cry at that moment? Because he saw how the brothers reacted, and because they had to go through this trip of saying, well, your father told us to tell you, to forgive us, because they were worried he would take revenge. The fear that they had, that those brothers, who were very high souls, the fear that they had that Joseph was going to take revenge on them, is what began the exile. For hundreds of years, chaos, confusion, they were the seeds. What does it want to tell us? That the exile never had to happen. Wasn't part of the plan. No. Part of the plan was only light and blessing for all the descendants. But they were not there. They were not there. And that is why Joseph cried in that moment, because he already saw the beginning of the exile coming because of how his brothers were reacting. So what is it that we should be doing? How do we do this? How do we make sure? How do we set the day in motion so that we can remove chaos, the problems from our life? When we get up in the morning, simple exercise, a simple exercise. We meditate. We take 30 seconds, even 1 minute to meditate. I desire the eyes and the heart of the Creator to be on me as a little child, as an infant. I want the Creator to watch every move I make, just like a parent watching the baby. I want to draw the eyes and the heart of the Creator to be with me, so that I will be able to make the right decisions. I'll be able to have the certainty, which is most of all. And by the way, that's the download. If you go download Absolute Certainty from the download section at rabbieabe.com. Free download. The meditations that you should meditate on 2 specific names to help strengthen our certainty in the Creator's light, and that everything that will come to me, everything that comes to me today and every day, is only light and only blessing. Even though it may be concealed at the moment, that doesn't matter. It's still light. And the more I understand that this is light, the more certainty that I have, this will help reveal it sooner, that the light that it truly is, because only light comes down from the heavens. No bad ever in the Creator. No bad ever comes down from the Creator. But it is us who create the situation that we go into exile, and we do not see the light as light, but we see the light as darkness. No, we want to reverse that process. And this is how we remove the problems from our life. By reversing that process, by seeing the darkness as light that it truly is, we can transform even the most challenging, difficult situations, at least from our own perspective. We cannot control the thoughts of other people. We can control our own thoughts. But by controlling our own thoughts, we can influence other people. You look at a person who really has control over their thoughts, who really has light in their face. Don't they affect you? Well, we want to be that effect on other people. Be a light. Don't fall into the trap. Don't fall into the exile. Be a light, and you will bring that light to all the people in your life. Many blessings, everyone, and I'll see you very soon on the next one. All the best. Lots of love.